Thank you for joining us at Coalesce. If we haven't met yet, my name is Joel Labes. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm part of the community team at DBT Labs, focusing on developer experience. Welcome to Getting Meta About Metadata, building trustworthy data products backed by DBT. We're very lucky to have Kelechi Orondu and Angie Brown from 4 Mile Analytics presenting today. Kelechi led the creation of the analytics engineering practice at 4 Mile and loves creating teams. Angie loves geeking out about DBT, and when she's not working on DBT models, you'll find her camping or hiking with her family in Colorado, which means that they might have all collided with Lauren at some point while she was in the wilderness. All chat conversation today is taking place in the Coalesce Getting Meta channel of DBT Slack. If you're not part of the chat, you have time to join right now. Visit getdbt.com/community and search for Coalesce Getting Meta when you enter the space. We, as always, encourage you to ask other attendees questions, to make comments, or to react at any point in the channel. Bring the memes. After the session, Kelechi and Angie will be available in the Slack channel to answer your questions, and we'll try and do some live if we've got time. So keep the questions flowing in throughout the session, and if you throw a red question mark at the start of your message, it'll be easier to make sure it gets an answer. You can also upvote other questions by putting the plus emoji on. Let's get started. Over to you, team.
Hello. I hope everyone is doing well this evening, this afternoon, this morning. Thank you, Joel, for the introduction. We are excited to share this virtual space with you all and share experiences in the analytics engineering world. Specifically, we want to use this time to have meta conversations and we want to walk you through how we explored using DBT and metadata to generate data trust within organizations. My name is Kelechi Orondu, Senior Manager at 4 Mile Analytics.
And I'm Angie Brown. I'm a Senior Analytics here at 4 Mile, and I'm stoked to show you what you can do with DBT and metadata.
I am stoked as well. So let's see what's on the first. We want to get related and share more of ourselves and who we are in the world. We want to introduce 4 Mile Analytics to you all, and we want to take some time to get to know each of you in this virtual space. And then we'll introduce a common data problem in what I'm deeming the old world of data experiences. And then Angie will introduce a solution she looked up in the new paradigm of data experiences. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and then we'll be out of here. All right, so let's get related. First, I want to introduce 4 Mile Analytics. 4 Mile is headquartered in Santa Cruz, California. It's composed of 52 human beings distributed across the US, Canada, and Australia. We serve clients large and small around the world who delve into all kinds of data of different industries, but who all share the same desire to understand their business and their operations via their data. At 4 Mile, we apply a human-first approach. And what I mean by that is we take care of ourselves in support of our team, in support of our clients to understand their needs, and we explore their possibilities and finally implement solutions that yield sustained and powerful data experiences. For example, we might deploy tailored modern data stacks for our clients. And what that looks like is we integrate data into a data warehouse, we apply governance and modeling to their data, and we integrate tools that elicit data experiences for our clients that our clients crave, including creating custom visualizations that might meet their particular use case. Okay. All right, so I wanted to share a little bit about ourselves here. Again, my name is Kelechi Orondu. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised in Augusta, Georgia. I enjoy flow moments like playing soccer, listening to, talking about, or mixing music. And as Joel alluded to, I really enjoy building teams and teams. One thing I'm working on is keeping my shoes clean. I've struggled a bit just compared to these pearly white loafers that you see in this picture. I'm still working through how to just keep my shoes clean, my sneakers. It's all a work in progress.
And I'm Angie Brown. I'm located in Broomfield, Colorado. If you're familiar with Colorado, Broomfield sits between Boulder and Denver, and I love to go biking, hiking, camping, playing soccer. And my 2 young girls, they keep me young at heart.
Excellent. All right, so now we want to get to know who's in this virtual room. Emma should be sharing a poll right now just to get a sense of who's with us right now. We've categorized, the audience into 4 potential groups. We want to see who's here. So you might be an analytics engineer. These are people who are using DBT every day and are fully bought into the analytics engineering mindset. And you are deep into the weeds of creating models to effectively transform your data on behalf of your end users. Speaking of end users, you might be a business user. A business user might not necessarily, be in the weeds, of course, of your company's data, but and how it's transformed and how it's consolidated and transformed. But you have pristine knowledge of the business and operational functions. Given now every company is essentially a data company, your work is dependent on the work of your data teams, and thus you work closely with analysts and engineers to get those answers to your business questions. You might be a team lead. This person runs the data team. You're whipping up and implementing project plans, creating epics so that you can achieve some sort of short or long-term project initiative. You're responsible of ensuring those initiatives are achieved in a timely manner. Or you might be a decision maker. We're thinking of CTOs, founders, who are making the call in terms of what technologies would be really useful for the business today and for the future, for years down the road. Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna check the chat to see who's here with us. Right.
Lots of analytics engineers here.
All right. Hello, fellow analytics engineers. Great. All right, we got one decision maker. Awesome. Great. All right, now that we've gotten to know each other, I want to introduce a common data problem. I'm going to show a Slack message. This is a Slack message that I received earlier this year, and I'm very curious to see for the folks in the room, who has experienced this or received a message like this, or maybe sent a message like this. So the message reads, Kelechi, can you review the sign-up numbers in the self-serve dashboard? These do not match our reports that we sent out on 6/29. So yeah, very curious to see if anyone has experienced this type of issue or problem. Let's see, I'm gonna check the Slack again. Yes, I like it. Everyone else, I like that. Thank you, Joelle. All right. So I would assert that this is a very common occurrence for data teams and teams that work with data teams around the world today. It's not the most ideal occurrence in the context of who's in this room again. So thinking about the analytics engineers, you start your workday with an idea or agenda of what to work on. And when you receive a message like that, you essentially have to stop what you're doing and help troubleshoot. If you're the business user who sent that message, right, you might grow skeptical of the dashboards or the data products that your data teams are creating for your analysis, and it just creates some anxiety, especially if you have an upcoming meeting with leadership and you're sharing metrics that you might not trust. You might be a team leader who's disempowered. You have your project plan, and given that your resources are having to stop what was intended for them to work on to solve for these issues, might put your project plan at risk. And thinking about decision makers where you made the call in terms of investing in those data tools to meet in some sort of initiative, you become frustrated in terms of, hey, did I make the right decision? Because right now we're dealing with some unforeseen problems in terms of being stopped. Our essential questions are these. Is there a way to be more proactive in solving data issues? Can we make sure that our source tables are up to date? Can we ensure that can we test the data to ensure that it's robust and quality? Can we visualize, essentially the health of our data stack and visualize everything that I described these questions above in a single place? Angie, what do you think? Is it possible?
What if I told you you can be more proactive, that you can ensure your sources are fresh, and you can ensure your data is accurate all in one place? It's a whole new world with DBT. Let me show you. Here is our metadata dashboard. This Looker dashboard gives you the proactive visibility into the accuracy of your DBT project. We built this as a proof of concept to show you what's possible and showcase what DBT can do for you. Of course, you'll want to cater your dashboard to what's important to you. Let's take a look. So here we have the most recent run and whether it was a success or failure. If I click on this link, it will take me directly into the logs of this run. So if there was a failure, I could go and look real quickly. We have the date, the last time that this was run, in the history thereof. We have our source freshness warnings. Uh-oh, it looks like we have one source that's giving us a warning. There's 31 that passed, so that's good. Next, we have our test failures, or our tests that have passed in the history. With DBT, you're also able to see your overall model status. So here I have my DIM customer, my fact order, and their tests accordingly, and whether or not they passed or failed. If you're worried about query optimization, you can actually even get the execution time of your models. Exposure status. If you're not familiar with exposures, don't worry. I'll be going over that later on in this presentation. What you can gather from this is that I was able to make an exposure ABC test, which is a dashboard. And that dashboard is utilizing our DIM customer, our fact order, and our order source. And these are the unique tests that we set up for each of those models and whether or not they were successful or failures. And it looks like we have a warning on our source of orders. So we'll want to make sure that we fix that before anyone consumes this dashboard. Additionally, with DBT, you're able to get your model paths. So here I have DIM customer, stage customer, and then I have my source, all that comprise of my, make up my DIM customer and their relative node times. And then we have our executions over time. If you want to see if there's any trends of things failing at a certain time every week, this is a good place to go. And then we have our source freshness over time. So as we mentioned, our orders is giving us a warning. It looks like we set up a test to make sure that the source is refreshed daily. And if I look at my max loaded at date, uh-oh, it hasn't been refreshed since March 23rd of 2021. That's a big problem. And in the real world, we would want to take care of that right away. So now that you can see how you can give visibility into the metadata by creating your own dashboard, let me show you how we're able to accomplish this. Let's take a deeper dive on how we're able to create that robust dashboard with this implementation strategy. We'll be going over each of these in depth so you can be empowered to implement the DBT tools in your project. We're going to go over our DBT tests. There's schema, generic, and singular tests. We're going to go over our source freshness checks and then our exposures as I promised. Within our implementation strategy, we first set up our schema tests. What are schema tests? They're configured within your YAML file and come out of the box with DBT. They are the unique, not null, accepted values relationship tests that are configured within your YAML file. So in this example, we have our fact order, and our primary key on that table is our order ID. So we want to ensure that it's always unique and it's not null. Additionally, we have our customer ID. We want to make sure that for every customer, for every order, we have a customer. So we want to ensure that's not null. Additionally, if there's a value in that customer ID, we want to make sure that it lives in our DIM customer. And that's where this relationship test comes into play. For this presentation, we didn't set up any generic tests, but I wanted to introduce them to you. These are assertions that you can make about your data or even regression type tests that can be reused over and over again. In essence, you can parameterize a query as a template. So in this example, you just create a macro, and here we have a model and column name, and then you can create your validation check. For this validation, we're just checking whether or not it's even or odd. And if it returns anything, it's going to fail. So you only want to write these queries so that they're returning failing rows. Once you set that up, all you have to do is within your YAML file is put within the test parameter the name of your macro. Singular tests are similar to the generic tests, except for these are one case scenarios. And to set these up within your DBT project YAML file, you'll need to set up your test paths. So here, I just use the default, which is test, but you can name it whatever you want. And then you write your SQL query to return failing rows, and you save it as a .SQL file within that directory. So in this example, we have our shipped quantity and our received quantity, and we're checking whether or not they match. If they don't match, we want to be notified so that we can take care of that ASAP. Source freshness. This is the acceptable amount of time between the most recent record and now for your table to be considered fresh. So within your sources YAML file, you set it up just as you normally would with your database and schema, but then you can add this freshness, and you can set up the warn after, and you can also set up an error after. You don't have to do both. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to set up your loaded app field. So what DBT does is it's going to take the max value of this column and check if it's fresh within the last day. One thing to keep in mind is that this is hierarchical, and that if you set it at this sources level, it's going to check all of the tables that you've listed below for this freshness check. Now, you probably don't have every single source that's going to be refreshed on a daily cadence, so you can actually override that table by table using these same parameters. When you run the source freshness check, it's going to run this SQL query for you in your database. So it's going to pull the max of whatever column you put in that parameter, and then it's going to compare it to the current timestamp. So exposures, as promised, these define and describe your downstream use of your DBT project, such as your dashboard, application, or even a data science pipeline. So here we have an exposure. I've set up an application of Looker. We have the type of application. And then I set up a dashboard. So ABC tests, like we saw on our actual Looker dashboard. And you just specify the type and what it depends on. So DIM customer, fact order, and our sources, orders, and customers. Now we can visualize from source to dashboard. So if you're familiar with DAGs and DBT, if you set up your sources, they will show up as green. So here we have our Jaffle Shop customers and orders. We have our light transformation of stage customer and orders, and then our fact and DIM tables, all being consumed by our ABC test dashboard. So now that we've implemented the building blocks to create our metadata dashboard with tests, source freshness, and exposures, how do we get the data into DIM and fact tables to then create our own dashboard? With every invocation, DBT generates and saves one or more artifacts as JSON files. We're going to go over the manifest, the run results, and the sources JSON files today. So first is the manifest file. This is a full representation of your DBT project. So it's going to have your models, your tests, and your exposures. Over here, I have an example. So in your manifest, you'll be able to get your job ID, you'll get your generated at date, and then all of the nodes thereof. One thing to keep in mind is your manifest file will be created and it will replace the previous manifest file every time you compile, do a DBT run, test, or generate your documentation. This is going to come into play when we do our job orchestration, so keep that in mind. Next, we have our run results JSON file. This is the timing and status of every node within your project. So again, we have our generated at date, and then we have our node of stage customer, whether or not it was a success, and the execution time. Again, we have the stage order, it was a success, and then the execution time. Again, it's important to understand that whenever you do a DBT run, a test, seed, snapshot, or generate documentation, it's going to override and save, it's going to save a new run results JSON file. And the last file I want to go over is the sources. This is going to list your sources and your freshness checks. So here I have my Jaffle Shop orders, and I have the snapshot of that date. So this is the date that I ran this, which was back in October. So that was the current day. And then I have my max loaded at date. And what DBT does is it's going to compare these two dates and check if it's within this parameter that you defined. And if it's not, it's going to give you the status of warn. The sources JSON file is going to be produced whenever you do the DBT snapshot freshness or DBT source freshness commands. So let's get meta about metadata. How do we get these JSON artifact files into DIM and fact tables to then be consumed by our dashboard? First, we're going to create a macro to extract the JSON file. Then we're going to clean up and parse the JSON into our own model files. We're going to set it up in our jobs to make sure that we get all of the new information into our DIM and fact tables. Then we're going to create and update dashboards and set alerts accordingly. If we haven't done so yet, we will be sharing a link in the Slack channel that will direct you to a public GitHub repo with the full macro that we used. We want to empower you to build your own metadata dashboard. For this demonstration, we've used Snowflake, so the JSON extraction macro and parsing are data warehouse specific. So keep that in mind. This is just to show you what's possible with the artifacts that DBT provides. So I just picked certain snippets from the macro. Again, you'll be getting the macro, but the first thing that we set is the source DBT artifacts. Then we created a stage that is the type of JSON. And then within a for loop, we put the file into the stage right here, and then we copy it into a table. And voila, we have our JSON files in Snowflake. That easy. So now that we have them in Snowflake, we can flatten that JSON and create our stage model files. And then we begin our metadata transformation. You can see that we were able, with those 3 files of the manifest, the run results, and the sources, we're able to create stage files that give us our exposures, our models, our model execution, run results, sources, tests, and test executions. You may have noticed that we also put our stage files into their own folder called DBT artifacts. This not only helps you organize the model files, it makes it easy to add a tag in your DBT project YAML file, which allows you to run the job in your job orchestration a little bit easier. After creating the stage model files, we build out our dim and fact tables. The dim and fact tables are what are going to be consumed by your Looker dashboard to create that one place stop to ensure your data is fresh and valid while giving visibility to your various team members. Again, you may notice that we put our dim and fact tables in their own folder. This is done for the organization and for the tag management. From the lineage graph, we can see everything we're able to build. We start with our DBT stage, our stage DBT artifacts that contain the JSON files. And then we have our stage files that are flattening that JSON and parsing it. Then we have our dim and fact tables, and these are what are going to be consumed by your Looker dashboard. Now that we have our metadata objects, we need to orchestrate some of the jobs to pick up the JSON and transform it on a regular cadence. In this example, I start with checking my source freshness. Then I'm invoking the macro we created. I know when I run the source freshness command, it generates the source's JSON file. So I add that command as my argument. And you may remember we tagged these models within the DBT project YAML file. So the last step is just to run that tag of DBT artifacts. There are a variety of ways to configure your DBT job to run your models. If you're doing DBT run and DBT test, it's important to run your macro twice. Once to pick up the run, and then again to pick up the test results. So let me show you. In the DBT run, I'm doing a tag of core, which is going to populate my dim customer and my fact order tables. Then I'm going to invoke my macro to pull my manifest file and my run results to see if everything was successful. Next, I'm going to do my test. And I know that my dim customer and my fact order all come from Jaffle Shop. And so one great trick is to do source Jaffle Shop with a little plus sign. And it's going to run everything from the source all the way to my dim and fact tables. Once I do that, I'm going to invoke my macro again, because I know that when I run my test, it's going to override my run results now with my test results. And then the last step is I want to update my metadata dim and fact tables. So I'm going to do a DBT run of my tag of DBT artifacts. If you're using the build, the run results are great because it includes both of the run and test results. So you only have to run the macro once. So here I'm going to do my DBT build, select my core. I'm going to invoke the macro, pull my manifest and run results, and then I'm going to build my DBT artifacts. So now we have the building blocks to create our own dashboard. Yay! And because we're using Looker, we can set up a data group trigger to refresh the cache of our dashboard. So one easy way to do that is to utilize the SQL trigger. And as I mentioned in the artifacts, the JSON artifacts, we have the artifact generated at date. So you can just grab the max date to make sure that your Looker dashboard is up to date. Looker also has alerts where you can specify conditions in your data that when met or exceeded, it can trigger a notification. And that notification can be either an email or even a Slack message. So if we think back to the dashboard where I had that source freshness warning, this would be a great example where we could set an alert. So what's our end result? Our analytics engineers, they no longer need to spend their valuable development time resolving issues in a pressured environment and can focus further on the development of their DBT project. Business users will embrace the data tool knowing the health of their data is accurate. Team leads, they'll be empowered to lead their team to get the work done instead of finding those data inaccuracies. And decision makers are confident they are making the right decisions due to the fact that their dashboards they are using are accurate. Oops. Before I conclude, I wanted to go over some considerations. By using the DBT Cloud Jobs, we converted all of the tests to warnings. And that's because when the severity is not at a warning, it will stop, it will fail, and it won't pick up the JSON files. If that's not ideal for you, there are the options available, such as Airflow and the DBT API. And then again, for this demonstration, we use Snowflake, so the JSON extraction macro and parsing our data warehouse specific. So in conclusion, I hope you found this presentation helpful. You now have the tools and code in hand to utilize DBT's robust testing, exposures, and artifacts to bolster the trustworthiness and value to your downstream consumers. Do you have any questions?
All right. Wow, thank you both so much. That's I was talking about it in the chat, but I haven't seen that Snowflake functionality, and so I was delighted to know that was possible, especially in a cloud context, which is not something that you normally think about being able to do that sort of behavior just natively. So there's a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe, Vince, we might want the slide deck back up. Just for Janessa asking, what were we seeing on that dashboard at the start? Was that data on a whole DBT project or just a single model? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so I created a very simple project that only had two tables, dim customer and fact order. So it was based off of that. And then, of course, I'm consuming all of those dim and fact tables that I created within the metadata to give us all of this information.
Perfect. And what's your preferred way to enforce that the tests and the documentation and the source freshness have been applied to the project? Kelechi, I know you answered it a little bit in the chat, but just to pop it on record a bit.
I'm sorry, could you ask that one more time? I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
How do you make sure that the tests and the documentation have been applied to the project? Do you do any, is it through code review, or do you have an automated process?
Yeah, definitely. So the projects I've been on, we definitely, before we implement a new source into the project, we want to make sure that when we're doing that pull request, that someone reviews it and maybe has like things that they're checking for. So the things that they should be checking for is in their sources YAML file that they have set up the source freshness checks, right? Whether it's a day, 7 days, a month, it's a really important thing to make sure that you're utilizing. Again, also you'll want to check for any of your dim and fact tables that you've set your primary keys, at least with those out of the box tests that are not null and unique.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, to add, we typically have just like our best practices, your kind of bread and butter tests that you want to make sure that we apply to every project. And then I think just getting in communication with the clients that we work with in terms of understanding their business needs and converting some of those needs from like a data integrity standpoint into a custom tests and integrating it there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. This gets very circuitous very quickly, but do you have a freshness test on your artifact tables?
You could. I didn't choose to do that for this presentation, but I think that would probably be an important check as well to include, for sure.